Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good topic for you today. Let's do it. Who's the most insane person you've ever met? Please remember to like, share, hype, comment, subscribe, hype, ask for a shout out, or hear more. I said that twice, sorry. And subscribe. Bye. Met this guy in a Dollar General a few years ago. He was about 70, and we struck up a 10-minute conversation about the health and self-sustainability. He was in good shape and lived by himself on a nearby farm. He spoke very intelligently. He was living the kind of life that I'd like to be living at his age. I was very impressed with his passion for healthy eating and home remedies. I walked away feeling really good and inspired. We bumped back into each other 10 minutes later, and he tells me he's thinking about buying the local power plant for a few $1 billion, that he has several Pulitzer and Nobel Prizes in literature for the many books he's written, and that some years back, some guy had killed his brother in what apparently was determined to be some kind of accident. But this guy never bought that. It was an accident. He had kept his brother's severed head in a jar, and he was someday going to confront the killer and show him the head. It was surreal, and I could barely speak. Luckily, he left almost immediately. This happened in a very small town, and so I kind of knew that the store manager would know something about him. He verified that he was batshit crazy, and that he said crazy stuff all the time. I worked as a psychiatric nurse for 30 years, so lots. Probably the most disturbed I met was a bloke who had a constant war going on in his head between, if I recall correctly, heaven and hell. He had vermins on his spine and nukes were involved. It was all very involved and made sense to him. He spent most of his time in his room, bellowing loudly. And if you went in, he'd just be sat in his chair, naked, relaxed, but screaming. Nice chap. My ex. We reconnected online during freshman year to catch up. We were both 18 to 19. She told me all about her new sex life. From what she explained, the guy in charge of showing new people around campus ended up taking her to a private location where they could chat. He brought her some food and drinks, and they were eating for a bit before he exclaimed to her that he had this feeling that she was someone special in a mythical sense. TLDR version of this story, after several dates, he convinced her that she was the reincarnation of a biblical dragon, and that her child he must impregnate her with, would lead the armies of Jesus during the second coming. I asked her what the heck that meant. She thought I didn't know how babies are made, and sent me links about sex and reproduction. She signed off after. A few months later, she hits me up again and is now living with this guy and a male roommate, and somehow both convinced her further of this dragon persona she was. She was pregnant, told me her baby would be a Valkyrie, and she would play Norse war music to her belly. When I asked for details again, she sent me instruction manual on how CD players work. After listening to this for an hour, I finally told her that I believe in demons, UFOs, cryptids, etc., but I could not believe any of this second coming warrior chosen one baby. She got mad at me, told me I needed to finally have sex, then I would understand everything, how she pitied me and then blocked me. I've not heard from her since. Had a good friend who I used to smoke weed and do psychedelics with all the time. He was a great guy when he was sober. We were roommates for about a year, and he was dropping acid daily for the whole time. Eventually, he had a psychotic episode. Told me all kinds of crazy shit. But the best was that Oprah Winfrey and Bill Gates had bought him a mansion on the nice side of town by the beach. This guy packed up all the necessities, drugs and paraphernalia, and took the bus straight to this house. Broke in while the homeowners were still there, and led the cops on a chase throughout the house and property after he stripped naked. Years later, he had another episode, stole an RV, the spare key was in his glove box, and led cops on a high-speed chase. He did years in prison. Nowadays, he is allegedly sober but also homeless. He at least has a full-time job but sleeps in his car. Sad story. Be careful with drugs. When I was young, like 7 or 8, I visited a river to go fishing with my dad. There was an older man at the pavilion near the river that I was talking to with my older brother. He was showing a little case pocket knife he was sharpening and showed how it was shaving sharp against his arm. He got to talking about serving in Vietnam, and it led to him sharing that he took photos when he was over there. He gathered photos from his glove box to show us, and he had photos of piles of bodies accumulated near a river's edge, and talked about how machine guns would basically blow them to bits since the people there were so small. There was a mostly naked young guy laying on his back with his head in the water like he was getting his hair washed in a hairdresser's sink, but his belly was blasted open with some of his organs hanging outside his body. He had photos of young naked women outdoors by another river. One of them was trying to cover herself, and he said they were like French whores and they had to make them clean themselves first. That was the first time in my life I remember feeling that deep, sinking tummy feeling that something was really wrong. An ex-friend. It was close to a baby reindeer situation. So much so, people told me the show wasn't shocking because they've heard it all before. She had stalked me for years after I told her I no longer wanted to speak to her, as she was severely mentally abusive and controlling. Almost drove me to suicide twice. She is able to do mental gymnastics to make herself believe her own lies, that she is a victim, etc. My friend was a self-made millionaire programmer by 27, grew up on Park Avenue, New York City, Wharton business, went to CIA to learn to be a chef just to do it. Mother was a concert pianist. His father was a professor of opera. They were well off, cultured and educated. Things started going downhill. His contract with a major website was failing. He couldn't fix his software, and this put him in a downward spiral. He basically gave up, dropped communication, bought a Hayabusa fast motorcycle on credit. It gets stolen a week later without insurance. Then he gets into a motorcycle accident, gets hooked on pain meds, which they promptly took away once he was out of the hospital. He started smoking the high-end weed they sell to the wealthy on Star Island, etc. in Miami. He went full psychosis, dropped all his possessions, went homeless, called himself unseen head of the Illuminati, and was convinced everything was being made or done for him. Told me to look at a $1 bill and told me it was his eye on the pyramid. 25 years later, he's put up a social media account but will quickly take it down again. I'm assuming because he's paranoid. Nowadays, videos have him mumbling to his fingers about the agents all around them. It's sad. Be kind of the homeless and disturbed. They could have been Nobel Peace Prize winners. You really have no idea where people come from. Just because they're homeless doesn't mean they weren't highly successful people at one time and something snapped. I mourned my friend because the guy's that there now is not my friend I cared about. He's gone. When I was working in a county jail, they brought a college kid in who rode his scooter to a storage shed on campus, climbed in through a window, and found a golf cart inside that he wanted. The doors were padlocked from the outside, so to get it out, he cut a hole in the wall with a chainsaw he found inside. He left his scooter behind as a trade and rode off on the golf cart. In the jail, he would regularly stay up all night chanting nonsense and vehemently telling every officer that walked by his cell how brave they were. He also had a penchant for eating his own shit. As it turned out, he was just severely bipolar and off his meds, being away at college without parental supervision for the first time in his life. Once he was stabilized, he was completely normal. ended up getting out on probation, and I never saw him today. I think about him often and hope he's doing okay. I worked in a jail on the mental health floor, too many to choose from, lol. One thing I'll say is that you don't always see the craziest people on the news. I think one of the scariest things I learned working there was the amount of people who are on the edge that haven't killed anyone yet or been caught. We have some crazy sick people in there that I can't believe are on the streets free without supervision because their charges are usually minor. Be very careful who you mess with out there. There are more insane people than you think in your local community. I dated this guy, Crazy Joe. I didn't realize just how crazy at the start. Here are some of the crazy things that earned him that name. He claimed to the top of a radio tower naked in the middle of winter. He was naked because the barbed wire fence ripped his clothes up. He stayed up there for 45 minutes, screaming my name. When emergency services convinced him to come down, he had hypothermia. He showed me the subsequent news article which confirmed it. I went over to his house and he didn't have any clean cups, so he told me to wait there and went and broke into the neighbor's house and stole some cups. I didn't have the heart to tell him they were dirty too. I was young, 16 years old, my first relationship, and didn't have the self-confidence to ever say no. Stupid and scared, so I ghosted him. That made him go nuts, and he started stalking me. He would come over to my house, where there was a glass front door that you could see into very easily. He kept coming over and shouting through the door until I apologized for turning him into being a stalker. There were more. It was a terrifying nightmare. My best friend's pops was an extremely unpredictable, violent schizophrenic. I'd been in a car he shot up because it had out-of-state plates, and he thought we were setting him up for the government. It was a rental. And he was buying some weed from us he bought from Homeboy into the house, while me and someone else sat in the car, and the only reason we survived was I turned around looking into the back seat, talking, and seen him coming to pull the joint out, so I pulled off. Same dude a few years later showed up and tried to kidnap one of his daughters. Luckily, there were a lot of us in the garage, so he knew it wasn't going to work out. The next day, he got pulled over with the machete and 2 loaded rifles, headed back to that house while bleeding out from cutting his wrists. He finally died somehow a few years ago, and I could write a book about the crazy shit he did around me and the hell he put that family through. By far the most insane person I've ever met. A coworker of mine. We once got into a heated argument over a promotion, and he felt slighted over it. He ended up killing his wife after she got into a verbal disagreement in which he felt belittled by her. Killed her while their 2 children were in the house. He then called the police, reported himself, and waited for them to arrest him. This was almost exactly 2 months before our altercation. I ended up getting contacted by the police regarding our interaction because another coworker had reported to our boss that he made a comment about how he'd shoot me if he saw me outside of work. There's a guy that spams the local news station's Facebook posts in the comments. They're all about this girl who apparently died sometime back in the late 80s or 90s. I'll use her initials, but every comment is, "The banger police remember BP," over and over and over. The guy responded to one of my comments with it, and I had no idea who or what he was talking about. So I checked out his page, and it's literally all about this girl and how he believes she was murdered by one of the state senators. And he's convinced the cops are working on this girl's case to catch the killer. There are also several posts dating back years, tagging the local and state PDs about working with celebrities, particularly one popular in the 80s or 90s, to make movies on his behalf. Also claims the third-degree elite Scientologists are scapegoating him. I don't know what that means to him in this situation. One post talked about how on 9/11, he was going to join the military, but that he received a phone call from a cousin at the CIA who told him he was to finish college first. One of the posts had a recent comment telling him this girl died in an accident and that she was never murdered or even suspected of being murdered, and he flat out claims he saw it happen. I didn't even have to scroll. This all took like 2 minutes to see plastered on his page. Met this 45-plus-year-old schizophrenic woman outside my therapist appointment who started chatting me up herself. She admitted she was there outside on court order. She was an active, high-functioning angel dust user who was admitted into the mental ward and admitted on trying to kill her husband with a knife on DV charges, throwing it at him, though, I guess. She lived with her adult stepsons and husband. They tried to get her help. Apparently, they hadn't ever consummated their marriage and got married during a Vegas weekend 20-plus years ago. She was put at this psych ward for false suicidal ideation charges from jail. She wasn't going to stop using and basically high-functioning enough. She owned the house and retired while helping her kids, so they couldn't do shit. To be honest, I did think she was lucid enough and admitted to a lot of trauma that she was just checked out of life and just slowly ending it on her terms. A lot was involved with her mother passing away, and her husband was picking her up himself. Not gonna lie, she was bad as hell, so I was shocked by her story, and how good she looked for someone on that level. Not at all like the stereotypical booking pictures. Didn't delve too deep since skits don't have an active grasp on reality, and I wasn't sure how much was accurate, lol. Cliché, but my ex-girlfriend. When I was 21, I dated for 5 months, and in that time, she would perform spells on me nightly and do a whole bunch of witchcrafty type stuff. That was the least of it, and merely a sign or a symptom of her insanity. Around month 4, she started cheating on me with some guy in the military who lived overseas, and sent him photos and videos of her and I nude and fucking. I found out about this, as well as some potential other guys she was also cheating on me with, and she begged for forgiveness. I was super naive, so I didn't break up with her then, and we had makeup sex, where I recall it was the first and only time when I was super angry while effing. I had the most crystal clear post-nut clarity after that, and started figuring out in my mind how to break up with her before I left that night. And then she started freaking out that she could be pregnant. She even had unused pregnancy tests waiting, and I think she sabotaged my condom. Joke's on her, I didn't come anywhere close to finishing. She went to the bathroom to do the test and came back explaining how her life is going to be so perfect with our babies. She was holding the tests up to a lamp in anticipation of the line showing up, and I told her there and then that we need to break up. She then started to fake a seizure and collapsed to the floor, foam from her mouth and everything, except I didn't believe it for a second. I told her to quit her shit, but she was committed and literally convulsed for like 20 minutes. I wasn't calling 911 for her, or doing a single thing more. Finally, she stopped her whole performance and turned it on me, yelling and spitting in my face and everything. A far cry from the life she was detailing not 30 minutes before. I will not ever miss that person, and she's one of the few people in this world who give me a physical sense of disgust when thinking about them or seeing them. He was, oh my god. He would cry one moment after I did something for his birthday, say how much I care, that I'm the only one who does, and that he feels it now. But he knew that it'd be gone in a while and was asking me if I was wasting it on him, and I was like, no. Well, then he would start attacking me and insulting me and throw away my gift and say I was trying to manipulate him and I want to get something out of him, and he would throw in like very bad insults and threats. He was incapable of ever taking responsibility. All was my fault. He would shift between different self-perceptions. He'd say he was worthless, then he'd talk about how worthy he was, and how people just didn't behave that way. He would hate people, like truly hate, unless you fed his ego, and then he'd hate you too. He blamed that nobody gave to him anything, and that all they did was take. While I was doing a lot for him, it felt like he was a void you gave stuff to, but they never mattered at all thrown away. He would block me with a bye, then unblock me in a really short time, sometimes 10 minutes, to ask if I'm okay or something. He'd insult, threaten me, then after a while was like, "How are you feeling?" He never said a yes or no, never what he wanted. "Do whatever you want, I don't care." He would pick up words that I had chosen and insult me and fight to hell about just one word. I ended up unable to do anything else while talking or interacting with him out of terror that I'd choose one wrong word. I still kept choosing wrong words. He said, "I don't listen. I don't understand," even though I was really focusing only on him, that he had all my attention. Horrible threats that involved pillows and throats. He'd encourage me to die and even suggest ways while I was in the hospital. Sometimes he needed proof that I was in the hospital because he wouldn't believe me, and even when I provided proof, he'd be like, "Whatever, I don't care." Triangulation. He would show off to me someone else and their conversations and how kind he was to them, and he'd praise them to me while belittling and insulting me. Told me that person was capable and worthy and had emotions, and that I had no emotions, was worthless and useless and an idiot nobody would ever want. It gets worse, but I'd need to write a book. He sounded like a narcissist to me, then a borderline, but he claimed he only identified with sociopaths. Definitely a cluster B, which is why I now get nauseous and very defensive around cluster Bs. He had been in therapy for years, more than a decade, with short breaks. I'm sure this is a topic we could probably all have an answer to, or should, because we've all met some people. That's it. But I want to thank Shinebox Prod and Kitty Coda for their constant support as well. So thanks, guys. And any other requests, shout-outs, or birthday wishes, let us know. Have a great day. My brother. He was recently diagnosed with borderline or bipolar disorder recently, which now makes a lot of sense. I had a ton of his crazy moments. Once when I was 11, he went to pick me up at my friend's place. He was 18, and we went walking home. On the way, we passed in front of a bar where one of his friends was. A fight broke out the moment we were passing by, and he saw his friend get knocked out. My brother went full berserk mode, ran into the bar and knocked 8 people out, kicking and punching. The deputy was incredulous when my mother went to pick him up in the police precinct. Another time, he went to a party, a rural area in southeast Brazil. He spent 3 days drinking, eating, and partying. On the last day, some girl invited him for another party in another place. He was hammered, took a bike from one of his friends, and went on his way. 15 minutes in, he slept while piloting, crashed the bike at 110 km/h and went flying 60 plus meters onto a sugarcane crop. He lost an entire tattoo on the gravel he landed. Last but not least, once he went to a football or soccer game in Sao Paulo City. The game was against the greatest rival, Corinthians versus Palmeiras. On the way out, he was on the way to his friend's house to a barbecue. A dude from Palmeiras approached him and started saying very stupid things and being racist. We're black. My brother threw a metallic trash can on the dude. The dude pulled a .38 on him and started walking to him, and what does he do? He walks toward the guy and grabs the gun out of the dude's hand, tosses it aside, and beats the fuck out of the man. The man is simply unhinged if there's a fight or drinking. There's a lot of these stories of his life. My father. Second place goes to the random ass out of the mind older woman who grabbed my arm when I was walking to school, urging me not to go to school today, because if I did, my whole life would go downhill from there, because they'd indoctrinate me and control my mind. I exchanged a few words, and she kept grabbing my arm. I wiggled free and jogged 30 seconds or so, then walked off at a pace, with her following behind. After turning the corner around my school, I ran inside and made it into my classroom and sat down. I was late and class had already started. I didn't think she followed me into the school until she opened the door to my classroom with 30 plus kids and a teacher looking at her bewildered. Close third place goes to my mother. My uncle. The stories of how he tortured my father in their youth was never proof, and their family never trusted it, brushed it off. When I was 14 years old, I was at a family gathering where he was. My father was not, as he obviously avoided him. He spent the entire day trying to coerce me into visiting them, his daughter's wife and him, for a week following the event, since I had vacation anyway and rarely saw them. I said no, as I felt uneasy about it. Friday, the week after, during the time he had proposed I was there, he murdered his wife in her sleep, picked up the daughters one by one from school and slit their throats in a car before trying to kill himself, with no luck, by driving front first into a truck. He had been sending me letters from prison since 2010 about how I was meant to be with them, and how it's my fault he had to do it. You psycho. A friend of mine died. A group of us went to visit his family in his hometown. Went by a buddy's house and his roommate was drunk. He kept saying, "I lost a brother today," and I would reply, "I know, man, that's why we're here." He kept saying he lost a brother to the point of making everyone just uncomfortable. Finally, after being silent for a few minutes, he casually mentions, "I want to punch someone," and looks at everyone. He points out my friend's new boyfriend and decides that this is the guy he wants to punch. For no reason. He asks, "So what's your problem, man?" "I lost my brother today." "Who the f*** are you?" "I lost a brother today." It took everything in me not to hit him. My friend, who's this poor guy's girlfriend, is visibly shocked. We got up and started to walk out, and the poor boyfriend is scared shitless. He followed us, repeating the same shit about losing his brother today. We got into our car and left. My buddy tried to apologize, saying he usually doesn't drink, but that dude was working off his rocker.